This is the new age of radical Islamic terror, where our shopping malls, parks, schools, office buildings, and sports stadiums are all targets for the jihadi killers among us. But America has one powerful defense that the rest of the world foolishly threw away, or never allowed in the first place: an armed, trained populace. In the face of this threat, the Second Amendment is as relevant and critical as ever.
I feel like a lot of people misconstrue the idea of terrorism in this country. The consistency in which we have seen these terror attacks in this country, we're at war.
We're at war with radical Islam. Actually, to be accurate, they're at war with us.
November 2009, we had a gunman open fire on unarmed soldiers in Fort Hood.
We're tracking the breaking news out of Fort Hood, Texas. There's been a mass shooting at the Army post there. At least 7 people are dead and a number of people are hurt.
In April 2014, we had a gunman open fire on unarmed soldiers in Fort Hood.
It has happened again, a mass shooting at a U.S. military base. Fort Hood, one of the largest Army posts in America, came under attack. At least 16 injured and 4 dead, including the gunman.
In July 2015, you had a gunman open fire on unarmed soldiers in Chattanooga.
An act of domestic terrorism in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The target was the U.S. military.
The theme keeps going.
You look at Fort Hood, where we disarm our soldiers. We don't trust our soldiers stateside to carry weapons on military bases. I mean, that's insane.
And when you talk to some of the survivors, they'll tell you they don't understand why they're capable of handling a firearm in Iraq or Afghanistan, but they come home and live on these bases, still serving their country, and are rendered defenseless.
It makes no sense that they have to live as unarmed people when their very job is to carry and use guns to keep bad guys from getting to us.
You know, I'll walk through a shopping mall. I'm a trained military guy. I start looking around, figuring what would happen if one of these guys decided to come in there with a weapon and start shooting. And knowing that because I live in Los Angeles County and because of the prejudice against the Second Amendment and the exercise of that right, I would not be able to have a weapon.
A leading purpose of the Second Amendment and the militia clause is the principle that the armed community keeps itself safe.
Our founding fathers would have wondered what we'd been smoking if they were told that, at a time in which we are facing greater threats, now is the time, and that's the reason why we have to give up our rights.
That's what won that generation its freedom, is farmers and teachers and scientists and shopkeepers taking up arms and fighting the fight.
I don't think they would have looked very kindly upon those in our own society who want us to be sheep in terms of not defending ourselves before the terrorists who are making attacks right now.
Benjamin Franklin talked about those who sacrifice liberty in the name of security will end up with neither. And I think that is as true today as it was when he said it.
We know that there are violent, dangerous, deadly people who hate us for no other reason than we exist and that we have certain freedoms. I think it is incumbent upon us to realize that we should not cave into fear.
I think the Second Amendment provides one type of protection against terrorism. If we look at the places where the terrorist attacks have taken place, they're all gun-free zones. They're all places where terrorists know they can hurt other people and not meet resistance.
Saturday afternoon, shots and explosions are heard inside the busy, upscale Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi, Kenya.
Westgate Mall is reportedly being held under siege. Shoppers are held by gunmen, and unconfirmed reports indicate that several people have been shot.
The former chief of Interpol said 2 or 3 years ago that going forward, if terrorists continue to prefer low-level strikes rather than spectacular strikes, then countries are going to have to consider increasing the availability of firearms and also permitting their citizens to carry.
You can have a highly armed citizenry in relation to the population and still have a safe country.
Here's an individual who studies this issue. This is his life's work. He hasn't always agreed with the positions of gun owners. But when it comes to being able to fight against terrorism, here's an individual who says, yes, the fact that we have armed citizens can and will make a difference.
Now, in America, you don't need to be permitted to carry. It's a constitutional right. In many other countries, you do. Americans, in that case, have an advantage over others who will have to start the process of obtaining the right to keep and bear arms from scratch.
We've had a significant number of mass shootings in this country from various motivations, which have been thwarted by lawfully armed citizens. And that's not the kind of thing that happens nearly so often in European countries, for example.
Breaking news out of Paris and what, at least at this moment, looks to be a city under terror attack on several fronts.
And now the AP is reporting that at least 100 have been found dead inside that concert hall.
In Texas, there was an event in Garland, and a terrorist who had been on the FBI watch list decided to drive from Arizona to Garland to commit a terrorist attack. He wanted to shoot a bunch of people, much in the same way that the terrorist in Paris wanted to shoot a bunch of people at that nightclub. And when he pulled up, we had law enforcement officers there, because in France, they have to call for backup law enforcement officers that are armed because the first wave aren't armed. And when this terrorist approached and drew down, bang, bang, he was put down by law enforcement. Because in Texas, if you kill us, we kill you back.
The veteran Garland police officer was just about to head back to his patrol car when he saw the men quickly pull up, jump out of a car, and start shooting at the security guard. The officer pulled his service weapon and shot the first gunman, who dropped to the ground. The second one got out. The officer took split-second aim, fired at him. He went down. The threat was over. Both gunmen were dead.
The idea of having armed citizens in public places, I want that to give terrorists a little bit of pause. Not just that they'll be killed at the end of their spree, but that they might be stopped before they even get a chance to start.
I may still die with my gun on my hip in a terrorist situation, but at least I have an option. It's just what it is. I have an option. And so without that option, I am nothing but a sitting duck. That's it.
Whenever terrorism rears its ugly head, we should smite it from the face of the earth whenever possible.
They want to scare us and say, well, we could be anywhere. Well, you know what? Law-abiding, Second Amendment practicing, God-fearing Americans, we can be everywhere too. It's remarkable that the founders provided our greatest strategic advantage in the war on terror over 200 years ago when they codified the Second Amendment. I hope to see more Americans taking seriously the threat of terrorism and taking measures to be prepared. Of course, the most important step will be installing leaders with the courage and principle to identify and eliminate our enemy. But the most powerful weapon we have is our freedom.